Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for joining us today for the next installment in the Grenzebach Gleer & Associates webinar series, Data Segmentation and Communication Strategy. Today's webinar is co-presented by Brad Manuel, Analytics Consultant, William O'Leary, Senior Vice President for Strategic Communications, and Jeff Bradley, Vice President for Advancement Communications. Brad Manuel joined GG&A in 2011 and has over 15 years of experience in development, wealth screening, and analytics. Prior to joining GG&A, Brad worked with WealthEngine.com, Hartsook Companies, and the Illinois Institute of Technology, where he served as Associate Director for Major Plans and Principal Gifts. Bill O'Leary also joined GG&A in 2011. Before then, he held positions in higher education, financial services, and with the federal government. He has worked with Georgetown University, Fannie Mae, Citibank, and the United States Securities and Exchange Commission, as well as the White House. Jeff Bradley joined GG&A in 2010 and specializes in preparing campaign case statements. Prior to that, he has held positions in development communications with National Jewish Health and Harvard University, where he also taught expository writing. Today's session will discuss using analytical tools to develop and refine an advancement communication strategy. We'll start with a discussion of the more common data points and strategies used for segmentation, then touch on some more sophisticated strategies that use both internal and external data sets. Finally, we'll take an in-depth look at a segmentation strategy developed by a leading East Coast university based on their own internal data. Our presenters welcome any questions you have during today's session, and we'll answer those questions in the time remaining at the end of the hour. To send us a question, please use the chat function on the right-hand side of your screen, select all participants from the drop-down menu, and send us your question. Any questions we don't have time to answer today will be addressed in a follow-up email we send next week to all registrants. Tomorrow afternoon, we'll also be sending a recording of the session along with presentation slides, as well as a short survey to gain your feedback. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us today, and now I'll turn it over to Brad to get us started.
Heather, thank you. Thank you for the introduction. I know that Bill, Jeff, and I echo your thoughts of thanks to everyone for attending. If we could go to the next set of slides, mine is not. And you've actually already touched on the agenda today, but I'll just go over that pretty quickly. What we hope to do in this first section that I'm going to talk about is give you a general overview of some advice on defining your goals and what sort of segmentation you might use, as well as talking about common segmentation techniques that you're going to have at your fingertips right now without going to outside data sources to purchase information or using predictive modeling. Then, as Heather said, we're going to use a specific case study that Bill's going to talk about, diving into an East Coast university and going from start to finish on what sort of data he had to work with and developing his communication study. Building off of that, we're going to give you advice on what data you should be collecting, what data you can purchase from outside vendors, data you might have already purchased that you're not using. And then the last part, we're going to turn over to Jeff, where he's going to talk about the strategy after you've collected the data and segmented to actually turn some of those people from live bunts or side bunts into every year givers and move your donors through communications into that ideal donor that you're looking for. So if you could advance. The first slide we wanted to talk about when you're setting your communication strategy, and we want to make this webinar more about communication and segmenting as a tool towards driving that communication strategy and setting that communication strategy, is really defining your objective before you start to work with your data. So what are you hoping to do at the end of the day? Not the big picture of helping to help more people get educated or feed, et cetera, but are you hoping for more participation? Are you hoping for higher end annual fund donations, more major gifts? Are you looking for more planned giving? All of these things have different end goals and are going to have different ways that you're going to segment the data. That also is going to lead into the second bullet point, which is, I'm sorry, could you go back? Do you have the data to fulfill this task? If you don't have age, then talking about planned giving is going to be problematic. So you might want to stick to the data that you have to work with and rethink your objectives, because you're not going to be able to get to that end goal And something that I learned quite a bit from working with Jeff and Bill over the last month and a half on this is keep your objective in mind as you're working through the process and segmenting. As a data person who is interested in segmenting and analytics, I can tend to segment a little bit too far. And Jeff and Bill were great at bringing me back to say, you can't segment 100 different ways when you're talking about annual fund participation because that's not realistic. So think about that when you're working with the data. What is your end goal? How are you going to get there? And make sure you don't go too far and do too much work or let the data take you in directions that you really don't need it to take you. We're going to talk a little bit and through the progression of this webinar. We're going to start with data that you most likely have on hand. I know that all of you don't have all of these different data sets, but we'll talk about what can you do right now with data without having to go to an outside vendor, without having to purchase predictive modeling. When all else fails, when you're looking for a segmenting strategy, and I know Bill's going to talk a little bit about this, you can always fall back on giving. Hopefully, all of you have some form of giving. Whether you're a new nonprofit and you've only been around 1 year, you at least have some sort of data set there. Are your people, can you segment them by major donors? Can you segment them annual fund levels? Do they give every year? Do they give some years? You can split that up and get some very rich segments that you can decide how you're going to approach from a communication standpoint. Demographic information, I know a lot of places don't get that. That is something you're going to have to purchase, and we'll talk about it, but some of you do have it. Some of you do have how old the members of your database are. Gender is typically something you can infer, but you might not have it, but are you splitting it by religion if it's relevant, education if it's relevant, anything that's going to tell you about the individuals in your database that you can split them up by, that is going to be relevant towards your end goal, you're going to want to use that information. Behavioral, this is something that I know you all have. Whether you are tracking it is the big question, and we'll talk about that as well. How are the people using your services or your nonprofit? Are they parents? Are they alums? Are they students? Are they receiving what you're trying to help them with? Are they board members, volunteers, angels that just give you money and you can't figure out why? You can segment these people by how they're using and how they interact with you. Of course, the big thing there is that you have to be tracking it. And we'll talk about that, but that's a great way to segment as well. And finally, geographic, also something that you have that you might not be tracking, not necessarily just are people from the city or the suburbs or something like that. I was actually at a client yesterday, and we were talking about they're a symphony. They have a couple other competing symphonies very close to them, yet they have constituents that are driving 50 to 60 miles to get to their symphony specifically. I don't think they had thought about mapping people out geographically to say, we need to approach the people coming from that far away with so many other options for their culture differently. And what communications should be sending them more? Should we be wording them differently? And that's the sort of geographic, not just what kind of environment do they live in, but how far away are they coming to enjoy your services? If you could, I'm going to hand it off now to Bill, who's going to talk about putting all of this into action, and I will leave it at that.
Okay, thanks, Brad. So I'm going to talk a little bit here about an East Coast university that GGNA and I have done work with. It's a private research university. Some important information is it became coeducational in 1969, has 4 undergraduate schools and 3 graduate professional schools, and an alumni base of around 150,000. And this institution wanted to create an actionable and meaningful segmentation of its constituent base, and the key word there being actionable. Some of the segmentations that are possible are very interesting intellectually, but can be hard to do anything with and to take action with. And as we're focused on communications and what you can do from a communications perspective with this information, actionable was the key variable there. So in assessing the data that that the organization had. We went with an approach that was based on a behavioral variable, that being giving. And part of the reason for that is because it was one of the few very reliable pieces of information in their database. There were good records on it, and they were sure of them. Additional variables that we might have been interested in weren't as consistent. I'm sure a lot of you may have a similar situation where there are certain records, certain variables in your database that no one really knows who created it, when the information was entered, who's maintained it, or when it was updated, or why it's still there. And so we had to take those pieces out when we were trying to assess how to look at this constituency base, and it ended up that giving was going to be the best way for us to do it. One other caveat to this is we also were looking at development prospects as a key part of the overall segmentation. And the prior way that this organization was viewing segmentation was they had a list of development prospects, they had a list of annual givers, they had people who were very involved in alumni relations and were volunteers, and there was some overlap between the alumni volunteers and the annual givers, and then they had everybody else. So we sought to refine this a little bit, understanding that the development prospects, for the most part, were not defined by behavior. They were actually identified by research or by one of the development officers or somebody else, and so it wasn't necessarily behavior that put them in this segment, but we needed to consider them as a key part, given that the focus was on preparing for a campaign. So based on all of that, if you could go back, please. Based on all of that, we came up with these 4 segments. The high-value prospects, so these are major gift and principal gift prospects, anybody over $100,000 in potential capacity for this institution. What we called the middle market, and these were annual givers. They were loyal. They gave 3 out of the last 5 years, or they had given a $1,000 gift within the last 5 years. There were the occasional givers who had not given consistently, but had given less than 3 times consecutively in the last 5 years. And then there were the never givers. They had never given to the institution. And if you look at the percentages of the total population, it was approximately 5 to 7% were prospects. The middle market made up about 10%. The occasional givers were somewhere between 30 and 35%, and the never givers were almost 50% of the total. And I don't think that this is necessarily uncommon with many of the higher institution clients. And so as you look at the dollar value of these segments, obviously the high value prospects have a much larger potential than the occasional givers or the never givers. Now there's always that gift that someone gets where someone hadn't given to the institution ever before and they leave a huge bequest, or they had been a $50 annual giver and leave a huge bequest. But by and large, we were looking at the dollar value of each of these segments and determining from that what were the goals that we wanted to set for each of these segments. We wanted to, from a communications perspective, understand what the business perspective was for each of these segments. In other words, what did we want to accomplish with occasional givers? And so we built our communication strategies around that, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few moments. If we go to the next one, please. We also looked at what people were giving to understand if we could customize our communication and create smaller segments within these larger segments. And so we were keying off of things like reunion and giving to undergraduate colleges, interest in financial aid or athletics, and using the interest in those things to drive specific communications to help achieve the goals that we're trying to reach, whether that be increasing participation or increasing somebody's gift size from year to year. If we go to the next one, please. So when we looked at each of these segments, we said, okay, so this loyal middle market group, what do we want to accomplish with this group? They're among our most loyal. They represent about 10% of our population, and they're giving us about 40% of our annual dollars, all told. What do we want to do with them? We want to get them from 3 to 5 times a year to absolutely 5 times a year, and we also want them to increase their gift size. So we developed communication strategies in order to help achieve those goals. For the never givers, which are down the bottom, many of them, we decided that it wasn't worth the effort to try and make them donors. There were many folks in there who had very loose relationships to the institution that went back 20, 30 years. I think it's safe to say that if someone had graduated from a graduate program 30 years ago and had never given a gift, probably not likely that you're going to get one soon. So what we focused on in that never giver category were the young alumni. A large percentage, probably 95% of the young alumni who had graduated within the last 5 years were in that never giver category. They just hadn't given yet after their senior gift. So our goal with the young alumni, we carved them out of the never giver category and focused on young alumni with the objective of getting them to give a gift of any size. Didn't matter the size. What mattered was the action of giving a gift. And so the communication program, the alumni, annual giving program developed a special set of messages and communications to young alumni with that objective. For the occasional givers, what we wanted to do was get them to give more consistently, and for some of them, get them to give larger amounts. So to accomplish this, part of what we did is we created a loyalty society within the annual giving program, and we communicated to people that they could buy back lost years that they had missed. And what was amazing about it is that program, people could buy back lost years for $25, and the result was remarkable. People bought back well over 1,000 years and brought in, I think it was close to $100,000 in extra revenue in that year. So the occasional giver, what we found was there were a number who just didn't realize they hadn't given. They wanted to, they meant to, but it just wasn't top of mind, and they had missed it, and we gave them the opportunity to make up for it and become loyal, and they did. If we go to the next one, please. One of the other things that we saw in the data was a difference between male and female. So as we looked at each of these segments, we broke down the male and female components of each of the segments to understand, was there a difference? So what was interesting to us is the alumna population was increasing given the change in 1969 to coeducational, and what it meant was that there was a younger generation of women who were alums from this institution. And so what implication did that have for us? Well, it caused the institution to say, how are we engaging women? Do our programs appeal to women? Are our messages appealing to them? We have a good sports program, but does that portion of our population care about that? And how can we attract more alumna to the reunion weekends? So these were a number of questions that came up through analyzing the data of male and female. If we go to the next one. So part of what the institution did is they said, what we have to understand is life stage and family situations, and looked at the programming for reunion and realized that there weren't programs scheduled for families, and so if you stepped back and looked at it through the lens of a young mother, the programming could be kind of unfriendly. If you have to travel to the city and do you leave your children behind, or if you travel with your children, what do you do while you're at reunion? So the alumni relations team put together some some program that was programming geared specifically to this. In addition, the Career Services group within Alumni Relations started developing women's networking nights. I think the point of all this is the approach that this institution took was a unified approach between Alumni Relations and development, acting together on each of these segments, taking a longer-term view and trying to move them in engagement and in giving.
Hi, Bill. Jeff Bradley here. We have had a question from one of our participants who said, it's interesting about the alumni and reunions, but in your direct mail, did you communicate any differently with women? Did you segment them out from the men?
Very good. They've actually just now started to do that. What they did after these findings is they did quantitative research among their alums to understand what were the issues that people cared about. And one of the things they found was that the female population of the alums cared to a greater degree about issues like scholarships and issues like community service being one of the core values of this institution. And so in the annual fund letters, they started playing with, I should say, different messaging to men versus women, keying off of some of these findings that they discovered in their quantitative research. What they found among some of the male alums is they were more interested in the financial situation of the institution and understanding how their dollars were going to be used. That was much more of interest to them, and they designed letters that spoke to those different issues.
Bill, I found with some of the institutions I've worked with that female alumni are interested in faculty recruitment, particularly female faculty recruitment, and the resources needed to get the top women professors to come to an institution. So
sure.
issues like that work well.
Yeah, and I think a good point to make here as well, Jeff, is that each institution has its own history and has its own hot button issues, and so there can be some legacy issues that you can key off of as well. There can be issues where there weren't enough female faculty members, and so in the 90s there was kind of an uprising among students demanding that there be more female professors, for example. Just making up an example, but understanding the history of the institution, understanding what those hot button issues were, is going to be really important as you're trying to reach these audiences. Okay, next slide, please. So another important piece, now a lot of what we've talked about lends itself to annual giving or to alumni relations, but there's this very, very important segment of development prospects and donors who need to be communicated to, and we often think, oh, well, that's going to be one-to-one. That will be the development officer who's having that conversation. But I think if anyone who's had interaction with the trustees from your organization, I'm sure have at times heard, they receive a lot of the same communications that everybody else does. So your development prospects are receiving all sorts of information from your organization, much of it unplanned, much of it you don't even know about. I had a trustee at this institution complaining that he had received the piano sale announcement, the sweatshirt catalog, the insurance solicitation, and the magazine all in the same week, and none of it looked like it came from the same institution. So all of these communications are sending messages to your development prospects, your major gift prospects and donors. And so we need to be aware of that. So what this institution wanted to do was to say, well, we need to develop a communication that goes to all of these folks that gives our most important messages to them. And so what they did is they took they created a President's Quarterly Report. Looked like a nice letter. Was usually 5 to 8 pages long, and sent it to every single major gift prospect, and let them know that they were part of a special part of our community and needed to and we wanted them to understand what was important and understand what was going on campus. That worked extremely well in getting out some key messages to them and to making sure that we were controlling the conversation a bit versus it just happening. Okay. So to date, this institution has done several things. Just to wrap up, they've done a number of things based on this segmentation. Now, they created the Loyalty Society, which I mentioned, and are focusing on those loyal donors, that middle market donor who is their most valuable donor. There's a concerted effort among the annual fund now to focus on young alumni participation and testing messaging among different subsegments, particularly right now male and female in the undergraduate alumni population. And I think the last thing that I'll mention that was interesting is the development team took the information about loyal donors and they prioritized their major gift portfolios based on the members in their portfolios who were loyal donors as well. So their portfolios were made up of people who had given sporadically or never given, and they also had people in their portfolio who had given loyally. Some of them they knew had given loyally. There were others that they weren't aware of. And so as they looked at who they hadn't reached out to yet, they prioritized their portfolio to say, well, if I have 10 people that I haven't reached out to that I need to, I'm going to prioritize the 3 who are the loyal donors. And so they've seen a good reception in those new calls as they've gone out to reach those folks. Thank you. I'm going to hand it over now to Jeff.
Okay, thank you very much. We're talking about collecting internal data now. Kind of like tomatoes, the best ones are homegrown. The best data that you're going to get is from your institution. It's not something that somebody else can sell you or provide to you. So I want to go through some of the areas of how you can start collecting this. This data won't help you right away, but your successors 10 years from now, 20 years from now will praise your name for collecting this. Next slide, please. We're going to talk in the different types of groups who are represented here. Let's go to higher education first. Next slide. We often rely on Greek organizations, fraternities, and sororities because they're around. They keep good records, and we can reach them. But they're just, on most campuses, a small percentage of the alumni. I went to the University of Tennessee back in the day. I lived in a Reese Hall, which held 500 guys. I still have great fondness for all the activities that went on there, and there was a dorm right beside us that held 1,000 men and women. People have affiliations with those dorms. And if a university can collect that information, I don't know if the University of Tennessee can go back and get it in the ancient days when I was there, but that is wonderful because you've got people, you cut across a whole swath of individuals who once they get out of there will go in different directions, but they have a very bonding experience, particularly that freshman year. You can get those first-year students. That's a wonderful way of connecting people. Student businesses, some we haven't listed here, student government, their program committees in your student union, the people who brought the lectures, the movies, the whatever, who planned the activities. Those are great experiences for those individuals. And if you can get those names from your student life or dean of students people and start collecting that now, that will help you. Almost all universities have survey courses or large courses that a lot of people take, often in their freshman and sophomore years. At my time at the University of Tennessee, there was an economics course where this guy lectured on television to hundreds of people, and some of them were in a big hall, but the rest of them were in satellite locations around the campus. His name was Tony Spiva. At Harvard, where I taught for a while, there was a fellow still there, Professor Michael Sandel, who teaches moral reasoning, a course that almost everybody takes. Very popular individuals, and if they're still around, and both of these are, you could have someone like that write a letter, and that will get open. This is hard to set up, admittedly, but it will really pay off down the line. Next slide, please. If you're at a healthcare institution, you have a tougher row to hoe because of the privacy laws, HIPAA. But you still can still find a little bit about your data. If you've held events, what people have come to those, were they fundraising events, were they educational events? If people have given to something previously, have they designated their gift to something that will give you a clue about what they're interested in? One little tip that I found in as far as finding patients and finding people who are interested in this kind of thing is if your institution has a Facebook page. I used to work with National Jewish Health in Denver, Colorado, and they have a wonderful Facebook page, and patients or parents of patients will often come on that page and say, yes, my son was treated there for asthma, I had a wonderful experience, et cetera, et cetera. Because that person has self-identified himself or herself, or if it's the patient, you can write to them on Facebook and say, that's a wonderful story. I work in the development office. Would you like to help some other people by telling that story? You can get wonderful stories that way, and you have not violated anyone's privacy because they've self-identified. These letters can be used in your these stories can be used in your letters. Sometimes you can have people like that sign the letters, and we even went so far as to make videos. So a little tip there. Let's go to cultural organizations. Next slide. Try to look again at what the behavior is when people come to a gathering. I used to live in the Boston area, and people there talk about going to symphony. They always leave out the. And older people tended to go to matinees. Well, that tells you a little bit about something. It tells you if we were going back to scheduling events such as Bill was talking about, you probably wouldn't want to have a reception for those people at night after a performance because they're not going to be there. What events are they attending? Do they come to special concerts? Do they come to new music? Do they come to rehearsals? If you're at a museum, do they come to the special exhibits? Can you track their movements? Have you got people who come there with kids? When I had little kids, I went to the Boston Museum of Science almost every Sunday afternoon in the winter, and you could just see all these parents with kids there. That would have been a great group to segment out and mail to because they would have different interest from someone else. The cultural places like that, again, if you can track the behavior. If you ever go in a casino, they track people's behavior from slot machine to slot machine. I'm not suggesting something like that, but keeping up with that information and making sure that that gets added to your development work. Let's go to the next slide. Again, once you've got the communications, you can send a letter from a popular professor. If people are interested in some kind of research, if you can talk about the exhibits, they might get a different letter that people who've come to the special exhibits and things like that. I'm hitting the high points here, but if you have questions about what your particular institution can do, get in touch with me or call me. I'd be happy to bat around and talk about these with you. If you have members, see what they're going, see where they're going. Sometimes members have benefits. Are they buying a family package? Are they buying 2 memberships and guest memberships? Then that tells you they're bringing someone. All ways are good ways of indicating what they're doing. But you may not have this data yet. You may start assembling it and start trying to get it, but it's not going to pay off at first. So this is where we come in with the external data, and that's what Brad specializes in. So, Brad, I'll hand it to you and talk about external data.
Thank you, Jeff. I know you're going to be back after I'm done to tell people how they're going to move all these people in a little more in-depth. Jeff's absolutely right. What I'm going to talk about next are more or less 3 different levels of external data that you can look at. The first slide is going to be talking about demographic data, which is a very inexpensive, in a lot of forms, option. Something as simple as overlaying age on your database. I know that inexpensive is an extremely relative term when I'm talking to nonprofits because a lot of you work on shoestring budgets, so I don't mean to be offensive when I say inexpensive, but as far as data goes, the costs have come down for this type of data so much in the last few years that it's very worthwhile to look at a simple age overlay. As Bill mentioned in his case study, you always want to make sure that the data that you're looking at purchasing, your money is precious, is actionable. And we'll talk about that as well. So if age isn't going to make a difference for you, then don't worry about any of this information. But going back to the museum or the arts and culture, you can buy presents of children in the home. I was, again, just at a symphony the other day. When you look on their front table, they have a lot of brochures. Probably a third of them are about involving children in performances or getting them involved in music, et cetera. But I know they had not done an overlay to tell whether the 6,000 people in their database were families and had children in the home. If they were to do that, they could start targeting these groups. And again, that data is not very expensive. You're talking 10 cents to get an overlay of lots of information, credit cards and age and married, gender. You actually get what kind of vehicle people drive. And a nice client story that we had 2 universities that have done this with GG&A so far. But they did a standard overlay and noticed that a large population of their alumni base drove pickup trucks. And walking around campus, they also noticed that a large population of the students drove pickup trucks. So when they were doing their annual fun calls, their student calling, they decided to link up student callers with pickup trucks. This is an absolutely true story. I know people probably don't believe me at this point. But they linked up pickup truck driving students calling pickup truck driving alumni, and made sure that it was worked into the conversation in the first minute or so. Oh, I just drove my F-150 to tailgate at the football game. And the conversations turned much more towards pickup trucks than the university, but they, one of the institutions actually had a 22% lift in donations from the pickup truck alumni. So there is an instance where they did an overlay not expecting to look at pickup trucks, and I don't suggest that all of you go out and do vehicle overlays on your data just to glean this piece of information, but they could look and think outside of the box and notice, you know, here's a segment that we don't know much about. Let's try some things. Let's try to link, and I think Bill talked and heard a little bit about this, let's link the present, those students with pickup trucks, to a past experience that these people had, most likely driving pickup trucks to football games. Actionable data, I have in the bottom left corner, left-handed. I was on the phone with a data provider. He said he has a list of people who are left-handed. So it was an expensive list, and I had no use for it. But as you are looking at your organization, just realize if you find a piece of data that's interesting to you, you most likely can get a list of people out there that meet that qualification. So the data's out there. It might not be inexpensive like age, but if you need a piece of data, it's out there in the real world. If you could slide to the next. What we like to do, and if you're working with a modeling firm, any modeling firm, what we like to talk to people about is imagining your data in different ways. So this is an age overlay. And typically people are going to do an age overlay and just segment based on age, and maybe male plan giving to 55 or older, or like Bill talked about, look at young alumni differently. What we've done here is aged the giving categories. So skip the benchmarking for now, but you can see all donors, even at the $1 million level, you expect people to be older. At these lower $1,000 and $500 giving levels, a natural progression would be people would be more towards 55 or so. If you have this data available and you're not doing this, I suggest you age your current giving categories, because you can see, for one thing, if they're not sending planned giving announcements to everybody out there, they're missing an opportunity. The other is when we talk about major gifts, and I know we focused a lot about annual fund, think about a campaign. And you're deciding when you want to do a campaign, and you were to do an age overlay based on giving categories, would you want to delay a campaign 5 or 10 years, knowing that all of the major donors are averaging over 70 years old in this database? You might consider doing a campaign next year as opposed to waiting 5 or 10 years for a 5-year campaign. So the data here can really drive your strategy rather than the other way around. And I suggest when you do get some of these outside data sources, or even your internal, start imagining it different ways and using it to drive your strategies that way. One thing that's pretty common that everyone has more or less adopted is well screening. It's been around for 15 or 20 years now. And obvious major gift implications there. Major gift strategy, that's more or less what you get when you do a wealth screening, a rating of 1 to whatever, $10 million or more. There's a lot of data in there that you can pull out that you're getting that you might not be using on a broader annual fund or communications basis. Bill talked quite a bit and answered a question about female constituents. You get private company ownership in almost every wealth screening available from any vendor. Think about pulling out the female entrepreneurs. If you read the Chronicle of Philanthropy or Education, they talk about female entrepreneurs being the most highly sought after members of the community, because if you can turn their drive and passion that they have for their business towards your nonprofit, and they are the most loyal donors, they're the most loyal volunteers, they're really the best constituents you can imagine, you have the ability to pull them out of your database if you've done a wealth screening. You might not be doing that. Other things, just simple ones, Republicans and Democrats, you're usually getting election campaign contributions. There might not be a difference in the way that you speak to a McCain-Palin or an Obama-Biden donor, but there might be. You can pull that information out and know that there's a Republican part of your database and a Democratic part of your database. Do you have different messages? Again, you might not, but just imagine the data in a different way and realize that you have it on a lot of people that you most likely have only been using for major gifts. Taking this one step further, this is the third piece. This is going to be a little more expensive, but this is predictive modeling, and we use, here at GG&A, we use a thing called PRISM clusters. It's a Nielsen company, the people who do the television ratings, but they are doing demographic data, so it's household specific. It's not exact to the individual, and it is clustered, so you're going to get ranges of information. But they've overlaid the entire country into 66 different clusters. And as you look at this chart, you can see the top of the chart is wealthy. Moving right to left, you can see where people live. They break it up for lifestyle. They do it by age. And if you go to the next slide, this is one of the clusters and the type of information you're going to get. So this is the young digerati. They have little catchy names for each group. But look at the detail that you can get. And PRISM is more expensive than a general demographic overlay, but not incredibly expensive. So if you're looking to see what kind of people you have in your database in detailed format like this, look at the bottom left corner. You actually know what their buying habits are. Do they order from Expedia? They read The Economist? They watch the Independent Film Channel? They like Audis? If we go to the next slide, I would guess that Audi probably has a bigger marketing budget than most nonprofits out there. Maybe not Harvard, like Jeff's been saying, but most nonprofits out there don't have the ability to look at the wording that they're going to put out there based on prison segments. But because you're getting the same data as they are as to what group someone's in, you can start pulling language. So if you have the young digerati as your core group of constituents, go to the Audi A3 brochure, pull out that language and information. Look at how Audi is communicating to these people. Do they even use print ads? Do they only go with the web? Do they go with the Economist website page, et cetera? So you can take that PRISM information and start using it to your advantage. And if you go to the next table, when you do predictive modeling, whatever firm you're going to use, they're going to use either PRISM or they're going to use a like product. You start overlaying it on your entire database, you can start inferring information as to what type of person makes your best donor up. So you can see here when you break out, and this is a database of 650,000 people, so this is a lot of people. The upper crust, which is the #1 PRISM cluster, wealthiest people, most philanthropic, et cetera, they make up 3.8%, but they give 6.5% of the money. And the top 6 groups give about 30% of the wealth. So as you're crafting your message to the entire database, you don't have to write 66 different letters. You could say, well, if I can write 2 or 3 letters and speak to these top 3 categories, I'm going to capture 30% of my donors right there.
Brad, I have a question that someone has sent in. You've started to answer that. You've got the top 5 there who are representing so much of your total. You can sort of see that those might be somewhat close together and right. But what about the rest of them? Do they just get the plain letter, or how far do you go with this?
Well, it's really going to depend. If you actually let me go to the next slides, I think we can talk about what's going to drive that strategy as well, because I think it is going to depend on who makes up the rest. When I think back of Bill's case study, and he talks about 50% of the database being non-donors, and after he pulls a young alumni out, there might be a situation where, yes, the people that don't have capacity and aren't giving you a lot of money are getting a basic mailing. Would you agree on that being the communications side of that? It would all depend on how the rest of the segments fall out, but there is a point where you say, I'm just going to keep spending money, and people aren't going to give me any money, and they're not in the correct wealth categories to be able to give me money.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That makes sense to me.
Okay, well, that's a very good question, and these next 2 slides speak to that a little bit more. We have 2 hospitals with very different constituent bases when you do a PRISM overlay. This first hospital, at GGNA, we've actually identified the best groups for philanthropy based on their PRISM segments, and we've made those kind of this orangish, I don't know, the rust color. And then we have a secondary group that's green, and the rest aren't necessarily great for philanthropy, but you do what you can. So you can see the bulk of their constituency is wealthy and in the correct PRISM segments for philanthropy. You might approach this and say everyone should get the same type of letter because most of the people are in these high groups. I mean, 60, 70%. So even if you focus on participation, that's going to fill that giving pyramid to have that constant flow towards major gifts. Maybe you're only focusing on high-end annual fund at this point because you know people have the capacity to give you $1,000 and you don't have to worry about $50 gifts. If you go to the next slide, I think this illustrates the question also of, this is a hospital as well. They don't have any money from top to bottom, really. They are in a tough situation because what I would say is they pull out that upper crust, maybe the blue bloods, and say, let's target those specifically for our major giving. And then the rest of the people, unfortunately, they just don't have as much capacity as some of the larger groups. Maybe we go to a participation only. We have that $50 gift. We knock out the $1,000 giving level to the general public because they don't have the capacity to do that, but we want them involved. And then we pull out those high-end people, similar to what Bill was talking about, make sure that they have very targeted mailings going to them, and they're not just getting all the general $50 gift things because you want them to be driving all of your philanthropy. Next slide. So what we've tried to do so far is talk about ways that you can segment your data, and we had a great case study, and then I've talked about ways that you can buy the data, and Jeff talked about ways to segment internally. Now is the fun part where Jeff's going to talk about the strategies behind using this data to get people to do what you want them to do, give at a certain level, give annually, et cetera. So Jeff?
Thank you. Let's go to the next slide. I write the annual fund letters for a public East Coast university, and here's the last group of ones I did. For non-donors, we talked about every gift helps it helps the rating with U.S. News and World Report of alumni participation. We'd really push a big gift. Lapsed donors, we talked about what your last gift accomplished. We didn't really get into, you skipped us last year. We just talked about what your last gift did and how it would help. And then this university is trying to drive behavior by creating a donors club. You get in if you've contributed 3 years consecutively. So they're pushing that behavior. So we had people who had made one gift. You're on your way to the club. People who've made gifts in 2 years in a row, you're almost there. You got one more to go. And then for the 3-year plus donors, you're already in. You are our most valued ones. Now, if it had been up to me, I probably would have segmented that bottom 2 group, 2-year and 3-year donors. I might have done a data overlay on that and segmented again with them. What would work the best with them, because we want them to move up. They're already giving every year as we want them to, but we'd like them to move up. One thing we haven't talked about so far is testing things. You can test these strategies by mailing 100, 250, 500, whatever your capacity is. Try something new and see how it works with your group of people. Let's go to the next slide. And Brad could even jump in here a little bit, but you can see how this might pay off. If you could just get 10% of your donors to upgrade, you can just sort of see the amounts that those fall out. In group number 1, 2,208 constituents, 817 are giving below the level they should, and you can just sort of see right down there, if 10% of them upgrade, you get 254,000. If 25% upgrade, which would be wonderful, you go up 632,000. So this can really pay off and can help you when you're asking for the resources to do this from your VP of development or whoever you're reporting to.
And Jeff, just to jump in, I know we've all done fundraising, and it is someone who's probably smiling on the other end saying, oh, if I just bump my annual fund 25%, I think the power of this slide also is we're telling you who to contact to do that. So you could see there are 817 people that are the ones we're asking you to give to. So that could be phone calls. That could be that letter from that professor you're talking about. So it's not that we're just saying upgrade your annual fund 10%. We're saying we're giving you 800 names, and do whatever you can to get them up to that level where they should be giving. And if you can just get 80 of those 800, that's the 250,000 you're going to get. So you asked me to jump in, so I did.
Yes, thank you. Let's go to our next slide. What you can use with this new knowledge of donors is more frequent mailings to them. As Brad was saying, mailings with more material. It might be a report, might be more expensive mailing. These can include newsletters, if it's a research-oriented group that you're aiming, an academic paper written by a faculty or physician. Then there are things called wow factors. I mean, if you find in calling around that your music department has so many CDs of a musical performance or a DVD of a play or something, or a flash drive with a lecture on it or something like that, segment out the people who you think this might play the best with, so to speak, and send it to them. People really love these sort of unexpected gifts. And an interesting one is library access. People in technical fields, engineers, scientists, people might like access to the journals in your library. Find out what that would cost and try that. Let's go to the next slide. What about the ones that aren't giving to you? Wealth screening can identify people who are giving to other organizations like yours but might not be giving to yours. Why are they doing that? Mm-hmm. Let's try to look under medical groups. Research. Are they giving to the American Cancer Society? Are they giving to the MS Society? Can you tell if they're trying to, if research is motivating them? Well, even local hospitals often have some component of research in there. Either a study is going on, a pharmaceutical study or something. You can talk about that research, and that would slant the messaging there. If they're giving to St. Jude's in Memphis, they're obviously interested in pediatrics, so that tells you kind of where to go there. Let's go with the next slide. We want to give you the takeaways, and one more slide, please. We've moved through this pretty quickly, and feel free, Bill and Brad, to jump in here, but external data is relatively inexpensive, and it's integral to understanding the people in your database. The best data is going to be what you collect yourself, so you should start doing that right away as much as you can, and then use these external ones to supplement it. The communications plan that needs to dovetail with your strategy, whether it's trying to drive behavior, whether it's trying to drive giving every year, moving up, trying to figure out what they want. But tailor the messaging. Don't send out one size does not fit all. Try to work with segments. And again, this can kind of seem overwhelming at first. 66 breakdowns on Prism. How are we going to do that? But you don't have to do it all. What's that saying? Perfect is the enemy of good. Start small. Start segmenting a little bit. Test some of these things. See how they work. Bill and Brad, what would you say on this?
This is Bill. I would just say the more data you have and the ability to combine it, the smarter you'll be and the more options you'll have. Using PRISM in and of itself may be somewhat effective, but not completely. Taking PRISM and overlaying it on what you already know about certain donors that are coming up in each of these segments may give you more insight about what's important to those segments as you start to try and develop a communication strategy around it.
Okay. We just had a question come in here. Do we have a couple of minutes more, Heather?
Yes, I believe we have time to cover, we can address probably one or two questions.
Okay, we got a question here. It says, we are a small university and we first segment by affiliation, always by school, often by class or program, then by basic giving history. As it is, we end up with very small segments, so I'm wondering how to implement some of your great ideas. Bill or Brad, how would you address this one?
Well, I would say the fallback position for a lot of folks in the university space is to go to affiliation. The only problem with starting with affiliation is someone may have been a pharmacology major as an undergraduate, but 15 years later they had never actually practiced pharmacology, and they may be a fundraiser now, for example, or had gone and gotten an MBA and gone into a completely different field. So I think we need to rethink some of our assumptions as we look at how we're going to communicate. And so perhaps one of the ways to do it is take all of the undergraduate programs and look at that group together, trying to segment on some different variables, not starting with, well, they graduated from the College of Arts and Sciences, so we must send them messages about the College of Arts and Sciences. There could be other variables, other information that you learn that helps you to understand what people care about. One of the things that a number of clients are working on is understanding affinity. How can we understand what people actually care about? A number of them are doing that through surveys and trying to understand, asking people, what do you care about? What information do you want to receive from us? Do you want, some people are using their e-newsletters as a means to capture information about what people care about. In other words, they give opt-ins or opt-outs for certain types of information. Do you want to hear about the college? Do you want to hear about scholarships? Do you want to hear about athletics? And based on that information, they're then putting it into their database and using that information to communicate more effectively. I think one of the important things to keep in mind is you can't make decisions about how to communicate from data that doesn't exist. So understanding and working together across the institution to gather the information that is going to be meaningful is important. Sometimes this means that you need to work with student affairs. If you're the advancement department and you realize freshman dorms are really were a defining time for people, and that's where a lot of affinity is, well, chances are you don't have the freshman floor dorm information in your advancement database. Is student affairs keeping that information, or are they capturing that information in a way that you can port it over to advancement? So sometimes it's going to take breaking down silos within institutions to get the data that you actually need to put together a meaningful strategy.
Bill, I'm going to call this participant back after this thing, but we'd also like to encourage you out there to get in touch with us when you have specific questions like this. We love to hear from you. We can give you some quick advice and get back to you, and always happy to hear from you.
I'd like to add one thing to that, if I could, very quickly. I know. I think in this situation, you might also look at you're segmenting for differences, and maybe you can look for a commonality there. I mean, we talked about Jeff spoke about survey course professors. So I know that most institutions, there is some common ground across, just like Bill was talking about a freshman dorm, but that's going to segment even more. Is there one or two things that attending Purdue University makes you a Boilermaker? Instead of saying engineering, liberal arts, et cetera, there are a few things that you could segment that everyone has in common for communications that is going to allow you to have a general message rather than allowing, of course, this is ignoring internal politics, having worked at a university that had 7 colleges that bickered over who got what money. I understand that's the situation, but there's also a common way you can segment communication-wise rather than splitting everybody up.
Great. Well, thank you, Brad and Bill and Jeff, for that presentation, and thanks everyone for attending and submitting questions. There are a number of questions we don't have time to get to today, and so we'll address those in our follow-up email next week. And we'll also leave the presentation open for about 5–10 more minutes. So if you want to type in your questions for our presenters to address later, please feel free to do so. And tomorrow afternoon, just as a reminder, we'll be sending out a recording of the session along with the presentation slides and a short survey to get your feedback. So thanks, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.